A safety data table is something that we compose before any lab that we do, simply for the fact that when we read the procedure and we see what chemicals we need to use, it's important to be able to recognize the chemical in terms of, is it a solid, is it a liquid, is it a gas, does it have a color to it, is there an odor to it, different ways that we can identify it with our senses. But also, and perhaps more importantly, we need to be aware of any potential hazards that might exist for that substance. By knowing those hazards, we can know ahead of time what sorts of precautions in particular we need to make. Besides that, there may be specific information that we need given the laboratory. We might need to know something about its density, or we might need to know its molecular weight, or its melting point, or its freezing point. It just depends on what the exact experiment is. But there's some things that are pretty consistent in a safety data table. Some of the things that are going to be pretty consistent would be the chemical formula, the chemical name. In terms of the hazards that are associated with the chemical, again, this is a summary table, so you want to be as concise as possible. So we're going to look for some of those keywords. If we find them in the MSDS sheet, we would use words like flammable, corrosive, toxic, irritant, poisonous, lacrimator. A lacrimator is something that causes you to tear up. So, short, sweet, to the point. When you see those key words, they trigger a certain response in your mind in terms of, okay, I need to be careful how I handle this. I need to make sure that, I'm absolutely sure there's no potential for ingestion of it, or whatever the case might be. You also want to include that physical description information and any other important information about the chemicals, physical or chemical properties. At a bare minimum, what state is it? Is it a solid, a liquid, a gas? Is it a solution? What color is it? Is it clear or is it opaque? Clear and colorless are not the same thing. Clear refers to the ability of light to pass through a material. Colorless refers to the hue. So water, for instance, would be a clear colorless solution, and say Kool-Aid. Blue raspberry Kool-Aid might be a clear blue solution. Light can pass through it, but it has a blue color to it. Does it have an odor to it? Anything that you can put down that would help you to identify a substance with one of your senses. As far as setting up the data table, you want to just create a table. Now, it depends on what you are creating your lab report in. If we're talking about your lab notebook, then you're going to have a handwritten safety data table. And so it might look something similar to this. If it's a typewritten lab report, then it's going to be a table that you're going to create in Word or whatever word processor you're using. The characteristics that you want to include, the name, the formula, molecular weight, physical description, the hazards, those would be your headings across the top of your table. And each chemical is going to get its own row. We'll go back to my example here. All right. And then, because you're not expected to know this information off the top of your head, then typically underneath your table you're going to list your references. And if you use more than one, then make sure you number them. And then also use like a little footnote to indicate, which piece of information came from which source, just so that you're properly citing it. Sorry, I'm a little off on my advancing the PowerPoint here and doing the video at the same time. I'll try and get better with that as we go along. Now, some guidelines for your safety data table. Neatness counts, okay? If you're generating it in Word, then that's not so much an issue because Word's going to take care of drawing straight lines. But if you are hand drawing it, then you want to make sure you use a straight edge, use a ruler, use something straight that's going to give you that nice even line. You also want to plan ahead. You want to do a little bit of the research first before you construct your actual table, because you want to make sure that the sections that are going to have a little bit more lengthy information, you've got room for that. So when we talk about maybe the physical description section, you want to leave a little bit more room for that. The hazards, if there's a lot of hazards, leave plenty of room for that. Things like molecular weight, where it might just be a number, you may not need to leave as much room in those. All right. Whenever you have a column that has units associated with it, a measurement of some sort, like molecular weight here, okay, you can either put the units in with the individual values in their appropriate cells, or if you want to save yourself a little bit, just put the unit in with the heading, and that way it's understood that that unit applies to everything that's in that column. Temperature, make sure you put down degrees in what unit. We're talking Celsius, most likely, or Fahrenheit, or maybe even Kelvin. Masses, are we talking about grams, kilograms, ounces, pounds? Make sure that you identify the unit of measure, always very important. When you're writing chemical formulas, you want to make sure that the number portion, if it's there, is properly subscripted. If you are typing out your lab report, then use the functions within Word to appropriately superscript or subscript your text. And the toggle keys that you want to remember for subscripting on Microsoft Word is the Control and the plus equal key at the same time. You press that and it will toggle down to subscript and then back off of subscripting. And above all, when you construct your table, whether it's handwritten or in Word, it should fit onto one page. If you're handwriting it in your lab notebook and you have a lot of chemicals and you see that you're kind of towards the bottom of one page, just start a fresh page. Don't try and squeeze it in, or don't try and split it between two pages. It just doesn't look real professional that way. So if you have to start a fresh page, there's no problem with that. But again, remember, be neat. Make sure that you include all the pertinent information, which we described here, and realize that for certain labs you may include other columns as well, depending on what the lab experiment is.